I remember when I was a teenager, well, and just preteen, and there was the old British invasion on the music scene. The Beatles were setting trends in fashion and in music, as well as in marketing and all kinds of things. I remember older people, like my parents' age, at the time, saying it felt like the country's going to hell in a handbasket. And I remember thinking, how dumb is that? Number one, there is no handbasket that big. And number two, it's just music. And by the way, it's better than the music you guys passed along to us. And well, that's just because I was a kid. I didn't have any background. And there are times when I hear myself thinking as I look around my world and I just think, man, the world is going to hell on a skateboard. And well, here's the deal. There's not a skateboard big enough for that to happen with. And yet I look at culture and I look at the world and at how things are going and not going, and it's a little bleak. Well, how is a follower of Jesus, how does a Christ follower live in a world that has broken, is breaking with your worldview, with your values, with your convictions? It's pretty tough. I mean, on the one hand, I look at it and go, okay, I'm still supposed to be salt. I'm still supposed to be light. And I want to be those things. I don't have a grand illusion that me as a light and some salt can change the world. Now, when I was 16, 17, even 18, I grew up as part of a generation that we thought we could change the world. We wrote songs about it. We carried signs with it. We wore headbands and bell bottoms and peace signs, and but about 7 or 8 years later, we realized I'm not changing the world. I kind of just need to make as much money off of it as I can. And so, generationally, that's what happened, I think. I mean, there's many more factors, and it's far more complex than that. But one of the bottom lines is we kind of realized we're not going to change the world. So, why don't we do the best we can with what we got? There was a guy in ancient times in what we consider the Holy Land at this point, whose name was Lot. And he had to wrestle to a large degree with the same issue of what do you do when you live in a culture that will not support your values. Peter talks about this guy and his situation in 2 Peter chapter 2. We've been looking at it, and he's part of the Lot story is part of a series of examples of how God did not withhold judgment on people who sinned. And it begins in verse 4. For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, and those other 7 were his 3 sons, Noah's wife and his sons' wives, which, by the way, I don't know if you realize this, but Noah's wife, a lot of people believe, was named Joan of the Ark. Oh, that is such a dad joke. Sorry. If he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what's going to happen to the ungodly. And if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. So you've got these three examples. You have the examples of the Satan, and what we're basically, the general understanding is a third of the angels went with Satan, and God kicked them out of heaven, assigned them to hell. And then there's the example of the flood, how God essentially pressed a reset button. He wiped out humankind except for Noah and his family. And then the third example is Sodom and Gomorrah. And last time we talked about the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and how the lawlessness that Peter writes about here of Sodom and Gomorrah was systemic. It was deep. And it wasn't just matters of political opinion. It was very broken, wrong behaviors. And God rescued Lot and intended to rescue his entire family from the destruction that he brought on Sodom and Gomorrah. The studies I've done indicate that we can't know, we won't be able to know where is the exact location of Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't know. I've read a few people who think it's probably where the Dead Sea now is. These twin cities, and by the way, cities in those ancient times were not sprawling like Minneapolis and St. Paul. This was, what we would today call big towns, maybe small cities, but at any rate, some people believe that their location is where the Dead Sea is now. That this destruction that God rained down from heaven, fire and brimstone, well, they created the environment where nothing could grow. The waters of hundreds and hundreds of years of rain collected, and in that soil that was now useless, you get the Dead Sea. I don't know. Smarter guys than I still are in confusion about it. But what I do know is God rescued Lot and his family, except for Lot's wife. And you know that story. God's caution, his proviso was, leave the city. I'm going to destroy it. Don't look back. Lot's wife, for reasons that we don't know, you can assign everything from how do I leave all of my home and my nest and a world that I had grown attached to, possibly friendships and other things. How do I leave that and not look back? To this is my life. I don't want to leave, but you're making me. I don't know. I just know she looked back, and when she did, she was turned into a pillar of salt. Now, Lot and his two daughters made it. They did not look back. They escaped by the skin of their teeth, to quote Shakespeare. I think it was Shakespeare. Anyway, God, this is in verse 7, rescued Lot, a righteous man. He was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless. The way they lived, the decisions they made, the lifestyle they chose distressed him. For that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. He was unable to stem the tide of their depravity. This one man, although some Old Testament scholars believe that Lot was a man of standing within the community. Honestly, he may have been, but his standing was not so high that he was able to influence people away from their destructive behaviors, their destructive choices, their sinful lifestyles. Instead, he lived in distress of these things. I used to be very, very hard on Lot. I mean, part of me, and be honest, I still sometimes feel this, that, okay, Lot, you were distressed in your righteous soul by all of the evil that was around you. Why did you stay? Why did you expose your daughters to this? For crying out loud, why did you offer your daughters for sex to homosexual men who were trying to beat down your door to get these two guests that were actually, again, most Old Testament scholars believe these were angels. They were God's agents. Why would you, if you were a righteous man and you were tormented in your righteous soul, why did you stay on? Why didn't you just pick up and move? I still wonder that. And yet I have had to back away from my pretty severe, harsh judgment of Lot to realize one man will rarely be able to stem the tide. In his situation, was beyond his capability to change Sodom and Gomorrah. Should he have stayed? Well, I don't know. I mean, there's part of me that thinks you stayed longer than you should have. There's part of me that even wonders if could this be why God was willing to spare when he and Abraham had this deal making back and forth until finally it was such a small number. You would think any town of any size would have at least a dozen people who were righteous, right to some degree, but no, there were not. I don't know why he stayed, but Peter writes, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that Lot was distressed. His soul was distressed. I wonder if your soul gets distressed by many things. And the reason I wonder that is because I've wondered that about myself. I have lots of preferences. Don't get me started on politics. Don't get me started talking about my favorite and least favorite sports teams, coaches, players. I have real strong preferences about music. It's not like I don't have these preferences, and it's okay that I have these preferences. But here's the problem. I don't find my soul distressed by very much of what I think it probably should be distressed by. The millions of babies that have been aborted. And if this offends you, I can't help it. I have to tell you, this distresses my soul. That in a country that does extreme things to protect turtles, we murder million upon millions of babies every year in the womb, and for no really justifiable reason. Are there babies that there are cases where does the mother survive or does the baby survive? I'm sure there are. I'm also sure that those are a minuscule, almost so small a percentage that it cannot be calculated when compared with the aggregate number of abortions performed in America daily. How does that not disturb? How does that not vex? How can my soul just say, well, I don't know what we can do about it. That's just the way things are. I don't know what yours is. When my soul is vexed, when your soul is vexed, there may be something we can do. There always is this, that we could cry out to God. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there are things that we ought to be doing in addition to that. I'm going to leave you to wrestle with that. I've already blown past my 15-minute mark. So that's what I'll leave you with today. Kind of an abrasive challenge, but it has everything to do with giving care to your soul. Hope I get to connect next time.